Okay, so now let's look at the more difficult ones where we're not given our vertex. So same thing, we're going to need to know what our vertex is, what our point is, and what our vertex is, what our P is, and what our orientation is. So now we're going to look at two examples where I'm given the focus, the orientation, and a point. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch my drawing again. So I don't have graph paper on mine. You should have a little graph paper template on yours if you chose to print out the template. So let's see, I'm going to have my focus at 2, 1, and I'm going to open left, and I'm going to contain the point to 5. So maybe something like right up here. So it looks like my graph, I know my focus is always on the inside of my parabola, might look something like that. So I don't know what my vertex is, but I know my vertex is going to be about right here somewhere. What that tells me looking at my graph is that my vertex, my h comma k, I know is going to share a k value as my focus. They both are, they're on the same line. They're both have a y value of 1. If I look at my h value and I look at how it's related to my focus, well, I know my h value is a little bit more than my focus. In fact, it's p more. So that initially causes me to think that h must be 2, taking my value of my vertex, plus p. However, since I'm opening left, I know my p is going to be negative. So if I want to be more than 2, and I know that this value here is negative, I'm going to have to actually say h is equal to 2 minus p, because then when I put in a negative p, I'm going to get minus a minus, which is going to be plus. So it takes a little bit of intuitive thinking there. But like I said, I also know my k is 1. I also know in terms of choosing an equation, because I'm opening left, it's my y that's going to be squared. So if I start plugging in what I know, I would have y minus my k. Well, k is 1. I don't know p yet, so 4p times x minus, well, I know that h is 2 minus p. So I look at this, I could do a little bit of cleaning up, but I can't quite yet solve for p. Because remember, I need to find my vertex and my p to actually write my equation. So this is just me putting together an equation to hopefully help me find out what p is, which will then help me find out what h is. Well, wait a second, I'm told a point. I can plug that point in for x and y, so I can let x equal 2 and y equal 5 and see if that helps me at all. Then I have 5 minus 1 squared equals 4p times 2, and I'm also going to distribute this minus here, minus 2 plus p. Well, that gives me 5 minus 1 is 4, 4 squared is 16, 2 minus 2 is gone, so that gives me 4p times p, so I get 16 equals 4p squared. Well, I can solve this by dividing by 4, giving me 4 equals p squared, and then taking the plus or minus square root. So p equals positive 2 or negative 2. Well, because I know it opens left, I know that p has to be negative, so I get p equals negative 2. I'm so excited that I found that because now I also can figure out what h is. Remember here that h was equal to 2 minus p. So now I know that h is equal to 2 minus negative 2, which is 4. And remember in the beginning I stated that it was a little bit intuitive, but I had to realize that if my vertex was a little bit more than my focus, I was going to have to actually subtract p. So now I know my h, my k, and my p. So now I'm going to go ahead and write my equation. So I'm going to have y minus k squared equals 4 times p, so that will be negative 8, times x minus h. And there is my new equation. So again, a little bit trickier than when I'm actually given my vertex. Let's look at another one like this. If you would like to try it, go ahead and try it. Otherwise, you can just watch as I do the second one. But again, I'm going to be given the focus, the orientation, and a point. So I'm told what my focus is, I'm told it opens down, and I'm told a point it contains. So again, I'm going to start by sketching a little bit of a graph. Graphs aren't quite as helpful in this situation as they were in the previous video, but still nice to see it. So I'm going to go back 3 and down 4, so somewhere in here is my focus. I'm going to contain the 0.5, negative 10, so maybe this here, and it's opening down. Well, so it must look something like this. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and say, well, I know that the equation that I'm going to want is going to be x minus h squared equals 4p times y minus k. I also know that p has to be negative since it opens down. Well, if this is my focus, if this is negative 3, negative 4, if I can fill in some things I know my vertex is going to share the same x value. It goes back just as far, and my vertex is going to be up from my focus. So I'm going to take my negative 4 and add p. But just like before, I know that p has to be negative. So if I want to become more, I'm again going to have to subtract here. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I actually want that to be minus p. I'm going to adjust that based on my drawing and what I know. So now from here, now that I have a little bit of information, I can go ahead and plug into my equation and hopefully then use my equation to solve for p. Then I can get a little bit more information about k and get a good equation in the end. So I'm going to have x minus a negative 3, so plus 3 squared equals 4p times y minus my k, which was negative 4 minus p. I do have to make sure that that's grouped together because I want to subtract all of k. From here, I'm also going to know that I have been told that x is 5 and y is negative 10. That's a point that's on my parabola, so plugging that in, I get 5 plus 3 squared equals 4p times negative 10. I'm distributing my minus, so plus 4 plus p. Well, that gives me 8 squared, so 64 equals 4p times negative 6 plus p. So 64 equals negative 24p plus 4p squared. So now I notice that this is quadratic, since there is both the p squared and a p term. I do want to either try to factor it or use the quadratic formula, so I'm going to get it to equal to 0, and I'm going to rearrange it a little bit so it's in standard form. And I'm going to say 0 equals 4p squared minus 24p, minus 64. I see I can factor out a GCF of 4, so I get 0 equals 4 times p squared minus 6 minus 16, which then if I try to find something that factors to be, or multiplies to be negative 16 and adds to be negative 6, I'm really running out of room here, I can get 0 equals 4 times p minus 8 times p plus 2. So p is either 8 or p is negative 2, but I've already decided that p has to be less than 0, so I'm going to choose the negative 2. So I need the p, I need the orientation, I need the vertex. So now I have my p, my vertex, I have my h. I can now find my k by saying I take negative 4 minus a negative 2. So my k looks like is negative 2. So now that I have that, I can go ahead and say I have x minus a negative 3 squared equals 4 times p, so 4 times negative 2, negative 8, is y minus a negative 2, so plus 2. And there's my equation for my parabola in vertex form. So again, a little bit more difficult in terms of comparing it to what you saw in video 1. A lot of information to take hold of. So work through it the best you can. If it helps to put a picture on there, put a picture on there. Look at what you're given. Look at how you can get to what you're not given. Use your equation to help you find P, so that once you find P, you can find that missing point for your vertex, because one of the points of your vertex should be the same as one of the points of your focus, and that's where that picture can help you decide which one.